Welcome to the Doctor's Life podcast with Diane Ansari Wynn, MD. Dr. Diane is a stress and burnout coach for doctors. With her 15 years of experience as an anesthesiologist and certification as a physician development coach, Dr. Diane coaches doctors on how to live a rich life of purpose, fulfillment, freedom, and happiness both at work and at home. In this podcast, Dr. Diane brings together doctors and researchers that are experts in health, wellness, stress, and burnout, as well as doctors that have been successful in clinical practice, academics, non-clinical careers, and business to share their expertise and life experience so that you can live your own life purpose, fulfillment, freedom, and happiness. To get free access to a PDF and video of easy and proven strategies that melt stress away and keep it away, simply register at www.dianeansari-win.com. That's www.dianeansari-winn.com. Now here is your host, Dr. Diane Ansari Wynn.
Hi, it's Dr. Diane here, and I have a quick request before we jump into the show. If you like this podcast, it would mean so much if you took just a moment to hop over to iTunes, write a review, and rate the show. That is how other people will find the show and get the same great value from it that I hope that you're getting. It just takes a few moments to click a star rating and write a quick note. Now, on to the show.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Doctor's Life podcast. So happy to have you all with us today. And today we have Dr. Dina Strachan. She's an internationally recognized Harvard and Yale educated. Okay, can I just pause? That's awesome. She's a board certified dermatologist, best-selling author, speaker, blogger, and consultant. And she's the founder and director of Aglow Dermatology in New York City. She is a respected and popular expert in the local and national media, an industry consultant on the topics of health, beauty, technology, marketing, and entrepreneurship. She holds a faculty appointment at New York University, and Dr. Strachan is the recipient of numerous awards, including being named a super doctor by the New York Times. And I'm so happy to have gotten to know Dr. Strachan just in the last few weeks. We met at an amazing conference that I've actually just talked about on the last podcast, but I can't help but mention it again. The Momentum in Medicine conference that was in Atlanta. Dr. Strachan and I got a chance to talk about the amazing work that she's doing, talk about her book, which is called Moxie Mindset, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But we also found out that we have a mutual friend in common, and that just goes to show you what a small world the medicine world is. Just emphasizes that we all need to connect and help each other and as we're going through, because you just never know who you're going to meet when you go to a conference. So, hey, Dr. Strachan, is it okay I call you Dr. Dina, or what do you like to be called, my dear?
You can call me Dr. Dina. That's probably easier.
Okay, well, Dr. Dina, so glad to have you on the podcast today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, hey, we talk about everyone's journey into medicine. So I'm going to have you launch into yours. I have heard some of your journey and then read your journey in your book, Moxie Mindset. It's so cool. You definitely have to share. So how did you get into medicine? And if you could share your journey as to how you got to where you are right now.
Sure. Medicine is always something that was on my list that I could possibly do. It's not that I just only wanted to be a doctor. It was one of the cool things that I thought I could do. I did have a role model. My mother was a physician. She was a psychiatrist, and she worked at the state hospital most of her career, and she was in private practice occasionally as well. So to me, medicine wasn't exotic. I know that for a lot of people, it becomes this big aspirational thing. It's like, oh, I could do that. So,
yeah.
Which is, actually very important in terms of, they say you can't be what you don't see in terms of role modeling. So that was like role modeling that maybe I just took for granted as an option.
Oh, yeah.
And I could be an artist and a traveler and, and all that as well. So, I was pre-med in college. I went into medicine thinking I was going to do more international health. Saw myself as perhaps walking barefoot through the hills, delivering babies as an OBGYN when I was a teenager, something like that, or doing vaccine development in other countries and mission type work. So, after college, I was pre-med, but I wasn't really ready to go into medical school directly after college, partly because I just wanted to know what I wanted to do for my career. Medicine offered so many options. You could have a practice, you could work at the hospital, be an academic, be an administrator. You could work in America, you could work somewhere else. I just wanted to get a taste of that expat lifestyle, if it's something that I felt I could do in the long haul. So I went to India. I worked with a grassroots development organization. When I came back, I worked in Mattapan, which was a rough area in Boston. I don't know if people are as familiar with Mattapan as, say, they are with Roxbury in Boston, but it was a neighborhood that at the time, there was a lot of crime. There was really bad health indicators. So I was a perinatal case manager. They had an infant mortality rate somewhat like a third world country at that time. So I did that before I went to medical school. And I went to, Yale Medical School thinking that I was going to be a cross-cultural psychiatrist.
I love it. I love it.
But being exposed to more, and I was in medical school during the AIDS epidemic. At Yale at the time, we had to do a thesis. We had to do a research thesis for an MD, which was very unusual. Usually people who have PhDs have to do some type of research project.
Oh, okay.
So I did a wet lab one, which was very unusual for me because I had avoided that my whole medical career. I knew I didn't want to work in a lab, but I figured if I were going to have to do a research project, I should get the exposure so I could understand papers and that type of literature better. So I did that. And while I was preparing myself to be an HIV specialist, I got introduced to dermatology because your skin is your largest immune organ. And we were calling the dermatologist all the time. And 90% of the patients, this is in the pre-heart era before there were great drugs to turn HIV into this chronic disease that it is now. Exactly. People were getting very sick. And we were calling derm all the time. And over 90% of the patients would have a skin problem of some sort. So I was very fascinated that the dermatologist would show up. They'd look at someone and know what they had after we had struggled for maybe 3 days. Wow. Trying to figure it out.
So they roll in and they seem like a magician, I remember that when I was in medical school, I think I was in medical school around the same era that you were in. The art of physical diagnosis was so amazing. Like we'd have a doctor that came in and they would look at the folds of your ear, and say that was related to heart disease or, it was so, or they just could look at someone's eyes and they could they were pretty good at estimating like what their hemoglobin level was just by looking at their conjunctiva. So it's pretty cool your experience.
Yeah, it really drew me in. So like trying to decide between dermatology and actually liked general surgery. I was actually considering general surgery because I liked the procedures. I liked the straightforwardness of it. Everyone told me to go into dermatology, the surgeons, the dermatologists, and the infectious disease epidemiologists. So I went into derm and I'm quite happy I did.
Yeah. So you're running your own practice.
Yeah. So now I'm in private practice, and that's not actually where I thought I would be. I was actually looking to be an academic when I went into dermatology.
After you left medical school, you had a really interesting experience in LA after residency. Will you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So, I did my residency in San Francisco at UCSF. And had been really excited to go to that program, but it was a bit toxic. It was a bit tough. It was a tough experience and it turned me off a bit to academia. It made me start to doubt myself in terms of my ability to pick right things for myself, because here it was, I got this dream opportunity. It was very competitive. I think they had like 100 people per spot in derm in San Francisco. I got one and it just wasn't what I wanted. So I ended up taking this job in LA, which was a place I didn't think I wanted to go because I had met this chair whom I had known of, and he kind of seduced me, pursued me to come down and take a look at his program, which I did out of courtesy.
Right.
Really, I wasn't thinking that I would actually take the job, but I didn't want to say no to him. And I went down and I really liked it. And it was considered like an odd choice for someone like me who had gone to Ivy League schools to go to this county hospital with a dermatology program that was on probation. And it seemed like a very exciting opportunity. It really allowed me to accelerate my career development in ways that I wouldn't have expected.
How do you think your experiences that you had before play into like how you're running your practice now? And your book, Moxie Mindset, is about how to be dynamic and run a successful practice, which I don't know if we've mentioned before, but you live in Manhattan, like running not only is this woman like a superstar, like throughout her career and training, but still it's a superstar, as I mentioned in the introduction. And then now she's running a practice in Manhattan. So it's not like the easiest thing to do. Why don't you talk about that? How your experiences are playing into what you're doing?
Well, I think, I started out my book that I never really wanted to have a private practice. So how did I end up running a private practice in a competitive area where lots of people would love to have a private practice,
right,
and find it too scary to do?
Yes.
And I think that a big part of it was being open to pursuing opportunities that seemed interesting and good, that gave me experiences and skills. It allowed me to develop my skills because, Moxie is energy, confidence, and know-how. So the job I took in LA was to work as one of 2 faculty members in a department that was training 6 residents for a catchment area of 1.2 million people. So we were the 2 board certified dermatologists for 1.2 million people. Wow. That would be like having 8 dermatologists in Manhattan, and there are probably 200. I don't know the number, but that's what we were doing. And I had 6 residents, and my boss was quite famous. And in order to keep his program on the radar, because it was small, he was very active professionally. So he was away half the week. And literally when I arrived at this job, it might have been like a red flag to some people, but actually it was exciting to me. I arrived the first day and he wasn't there. He wasn't there the whole week that I started, and I was just fresh out of residency.
Oh, yeah.
And I was basically running a program for 6 residents when I arrived. And, they thought, it's like, I guess he trusts me.
Right.
So for a lot of people, that would have been maybe too much. And I just saw it as like, well, I'm going to do this. What does it take to do this?
Yeah.
And I didn't even realize that was what I was doing until I was already in it.
Right. It's interesting because of docs, we tend to like to be safe, but developing yourself as a leader, from what I'm hearing you say, is almost exactly the opposite, where you need to be able to take on opportunities that will grow you. And if they're a safe opportunity, quote unquote, safe opportunity, then maybe it's not going to grow you as much as you might need to grow.
Exactly. Because if it's so familiar, you've probably done it before. So in taking that position on in Los Angeles, and I helped get their program off probation, not realizing that I was doing it, but just like, what do they need? What do we have to do? What's going on here? This should be here. It was actually preparation for running a private practice that I never thought I wanted or, was looking to have. Mm-hmm. So it's just building on different types of experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're saying that you've mentioned a couple of times that the private practice was kind of an unexpected thing. So I'm sure there's a story behind that. You mind sharing that?
Well, yeah, basically in my mind, running a business, I as a doctor, I kind of felt myself more like an artist. I'm an academic artist. I'm a healer. I take care of the patients, and I let those boring people in suits handle all the business stuff, and I come in and do my thing.
Right. Well, You sound like many, 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 many doctors.
Yes, many, many doctors. And, just like, musicians, the artists, they get taken advantage of when you're not paying attention to your royalties and ownership and taking agency around your career and what your contributions are.
Mm-hmm.
I found that academia was becoming more and more corporate, like business. So, I ended up leaving that position in LA because I wanted to be back in New York. And also I just wanted a position where I would have an opportunity to have my own faculty practice, which wasn't available in that particular position because I didn't want all of my medical care to come through somebody else because I was always working with residents every time I was taking care of people. And I also wanted to be able to explore options that weren't part of the county hospital system, very limited formulary, that sort of thing. So I took a position in New York that allowed a combination, but really a lot of the position was, and your compensation was dependent on what was produced in faculty practice. And I came to see that how things are run. When I gave away power, or if I expected that other people were going to do their part of it to the same standard that I was doing my part, that wasn't always going to be the case. So I found myself working and the money wasn't being collected. Like maybe I negotiated a good percentage, but if they don't have a good collection rate, you have a good percentage of not very much.
Yeah. So you're finding that for you, the next step was then to have your own practice, which is...
Yeah. So I was a little disillusioned and I was trying to think, what do I want to do? Because it seemed like many of the academic positions were very similar. There's a lot of politics. There was a lot of things going on at levels that I just did not have control over. And I didn't think that things were being run particularly well. So it seemed that like if I was going to go to work every day and be happy and feel satisfied, that I would need to throw up my own shingle, which in my mind was like a ball and chain. Boring, routine, the mom and pop shop. And I never imagined that running a business could be exciting.
Yeah.
And that was partly fear.
Right. So now you do have a profitable, independent practice in a competitive market.
Yes.
Just as it says in your book, Moxie Mindset. You seem very content in what you're doing. So why don't you share how you came to be successful in what you're doing now? And there's other things that you do too. As I mentioned, you're an author, you're a blogger, you're a speaker. How do you fit all those things in and actually be the opposite of kind of that boring mom and pop shop doc that you thought you might be? You're the opposite of that.
In order to build a business, it really made me have to grow in areas that I wouldn't have necessarily thought would be relevant to medicine. You have to learn how to market a small business in a competitive market. So things like very early, I took on YouTube and I started to do YouTube videos to market my business. It was really a survival strategy. I was taking skills that I had and using all of me to bootstrap it and grow my business, which I started with my personal credit cards. I did not prepare and write out a business plan. I would meet with people and they're like, this business plan, and I'd start and I'm like, I can't do this. I can't write this out. I just have to go and do it. But looking at opportunities and saying, I could do that. How could I use this, to my advantage to grow my business? I like to socialize. This is when I was like, in my early 30s and footloose and fancy free, and I didn't have a daughter, and I would go out and just socializing with people, and they talk about what you did, and you'd meet people. I mean, so many business opportunities were just from back in the day, handing out cards and meeting people and getting to know them in real life. I just sort of like brought my whole self in. So I realized that in getting to where I had gotten in life, I had all these resources. Nowadays, we question a lot, like your education. Oh, is it worth it to go to college? Is it worth it to do X, Y, Z? And I think that's a fair question. At the same time, a lot of what one gets, out of doing something like going to college isn't necessarily the poetry class that you got your A, B, or C in,
Right.
but it's all the things that it takes, all that executive function to get your application in on time, go to your interview, present yourself well, all of those skills.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually a big part of it too. It's not just the classes.
Right.
So
Right.
it's how you execute things. So I had done a lot of things to get myself to a certain position. And now I wasn't just relying on my academic transcript or my training or what I studied for the boards. And that I realized I had a lot of those resources as well.
Yeah. If you were to kind of break it down for someone that they're like, I want to be like Dr. Strachan, I want to have my own practice, and I want to have it be dynamic and not, I don't want to have a ball and chain. I want to have a dynamic practice. One of the things that you mentioned was to bring yourself to the practice. So what does that mean exactly?
We can have a limited, defined sense of what it means to be in a certain profession. For example, a doctor. When I first moved back to New York, I remember I'd meet people and they'd say, "Oh, I thought you were an actress. I didn't think you were a doctor." And back then, sometimes that would seem insulting.
Right. I was like, I wonder how she took that.
Yeah. And I don't know that that's necessarily an insult, because I think it's cool. I'd love to be an actress. That would be fun. But I think maybe it's because I was willing to express myself beyond this old school, and that was usually built around an older white man. You know what I mean? That suit didn't necessarily fit me. If I'm going to be happy being a doctor, I have to be able to be myself as I'm being a doctor. Otherwise, I'm going to burn out. Otherwise, it's going to seem like I have to be somebody else and then run away. And then the people who are attracted to that will come, because I think we have this idea of generic, and that there's this generic way that everyone's supposed to be and everyone will be attracted to that, but that's not true. And you can't take care of everybody. So you want to make sure that if everybody wanted to come see me, I wouldn't be able to take care of everyone. So what I want to be is the best I can be for the people who like me.
Yeah. It's actually a paradigm shift and a really interesting way to think about being, whether you're running your own practice or whether you're part of a larger practice. And of course, it's always swirling around, especially, the work that I do around stress and burnout when I work with docs. There's a lot of complaining about, I have to get so many RVUs, I have to be this type of person, I feel constricted. And what you're suggesting is that you don't have to be constricted, because in some ways that can be self-imposed, where you're sort of buying the model that may not fit you. And
Exactly. I mean, there's diversity in the world. I mean, I've seen articles about how the doctor should dress. Should dress according to whom? I mean, there are probably some standards in terms of comfort, functionality, hygiene, the whole thing with the ties. Ties are quite dirty and not hygienic. And I think they're outlawed for doctors in the UK, but that's considered more professional garb for men.
Right.
And it's sort of interesting. So should you wear heels, or should you wear colors, or that sort of thing? And I think that puts a lot of stress on doctors, like even little things like that. We're living in this age of where everyone does these online reviews about people. And I hear a lot of doctors complaining about that. And a lot of the comments really are not about what people went in for, but their opinion of, oh, this person wears this type of earring, or the office is too flashy. I mean, then don't go. You know what I mean? It's a way to try to control and drive people to feel like they have to conform to something that causes a lot of stress for certain people to conform to. And that's one of the beautiful things about independent practices, is that you can have that variety and that diversity that really does better serve the public in some respects. And it's a shame that a lot of pressures right now in medicine are driving people away from that. I think that, the pendulum is going to swing.
You think it's going to swing back to more of the independent, smaller practices?
Well, I think so. I think a lot of the discontent is around people having to put the square peg in the round hole.
Mm-hmm.
We can have both.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting concept. It's interesting and it makes sense, right? Because fundamentally, I'm a coach, so I'm all about like people expressing themselves, their true, authentic selves. And when you show up in the office and you're trying to suppress yourself and the way that you express yourself, then you can't really be your full self and for your patients. And a lot of patients and docs feel disconnected from each other. And part of that is because if you're trying to be like in a certain, you have the opposite of the Moxie mindset, where you have a sort of mindset where you're trying to fill a role, then you're confused. And that kind of comes out in the way that you deal with your staff and the way that you deal with your patients, because you're not relaxed and comfortable in who you are. Now, of course, I want to put a caveat in here, because some people are like, well, being myself is being someone who might be, inappropriate or something. When we were in the OR, we used to tell a lot of jokes that were definitely like inappropriate. And that's certainly not, I'm not advocating that or like being yourself in a way that makes other people uncomfortable is never cool.
Oh, absolutely.
But,
I was on the disciplinary board for New York State. So yeah, you can be yourself. There are some boundaries,
right.
You still have to be professional, but what professional is can expand beyond something that was sort of just set up for a certain subset of the population.
Right. Yeah. And I agree. And it's something that we were talking about actually before we started recording too, is that to have more work-life integration, where instead of feeling like, okay, work is where I'm this stuffy person that really can't be myself at work. You hear that sometimes. And I can't wait until I leave work so that I can be myself. And there's a fallacy in that one, but that's also one of the things that you're saying is like the key to having successful practice is to bring yourself to work. And I don't want to put words in my mouth, but bringing your work is part of your life and your life's part of your work. So you really can't separate the two.
Hopefully we've chosen work that we love, that we feel excited about, so that when we're working, of course you want to take breaks, of course you want to do things other than work, that you feel like you're in your purpose, you're enjoying it, so that the boundary between life and work doesn't really exist. You might float to other aspects of your life other than seeing patients, but I'd say that, what I find concerning is that for a lot of people, this idea of seeing patients and being a clinician, being a clinical doctor, it's sort of like structured around a burnout model these days, where people are like holding their breath till they can be done with that. And I don't believe that has to be so.
Mm-hmm.
You hear about a lot of jobs because there are shortages where they attract the physicians with these very high salaries, but then you often hear those people complaining the most. And when you really listen, it sounds like it was a job model kind of set up to attract you with just money that it's kind of hard to sustain. You can't do anything else. It's very restrictive. And more I hear from people about contracts where if they do anything outside of the hospital for financial gain, any type of business, that the hospital or their employer takes the money. These things I just find incredible. And you would think that they were odd, but I hear it as, much more common. Certainly, those types of conditions are not ones in which I think people would be planning a several decade-long career.
Yeah, they're not. So one of the things that I love about your point of view is that, and I think we share that, as a matter of fact, I know we share the same point of view, which is that we're both on the side of doctors doing what they want to do and what they love to do. And that does not mean that you have to leave medicine in order to do it. As a matter of fact, a lot of the docs that I work with, they kind of lost their way, they've lost their purpose. So they just, once they find it, and usually they find it right back in medicine, it may, the way that they view their practice might change, or they may change their style of practice. Like you said, you went from academics to a dynamic, independent practice, and you were able to bring in some innovative ways of marketing your practice. You do the YouTube videos and blogging, and the way that you developed your practice was something that was a good fit for you. And a lot of docs, I find, once they regain their practice, they find a good fit and they start taking better care of themselves, paying attention to themselves as human beings, as opposed to this doctor mold that seems very stiff and stodgy. Once they lean into themselves again and developing themselves, then they go right back into practice, and they find that they have a very happy career after that. So I completely agree with what you're saying. And I love with the tips that you've been able to give and the examples from your own life that you were able to share. If you guys heard the introduction, this woman is a superstar doctor, literally. The New York Times said so. Do you have any last thoughts here, Dr. Strachan, for Dr. Dina?
Well, I wrote my book, Moxie Mindset, dedicated to doctors who went into medicine to help patients, to take care of patients who actually have the moxie to believe that they too should be able to do that and be happy and free. And my last word is that it is possible, and that a lot of it is we, the doctors, and our limiting beliefs about what it means to be a doctor and how we're supposed to be a doctor, and our decision that shouldn't be happy, shouldn't be lucrative, shouldn't be fun. So I'd say, work on yourself, work on your mindset. If you can believe it, you can achieve it. And, you can have that practice either independent or even if you're employed, there is hope for you to practice with a smile on your face and have
fun. Beautiful. Yes. Yes. That is beautiful. Well, let's just talk about, for folks wanted, and I'm sure you guys do, want to delve into this topic some more. There is a book you can purchase, Moxie Mindset. You can hear. How about talking about where people can find your book, how they might be able to find out more about what you're doing and what you're about? Well,
if you would like to purchase Moxie Mindset, it is available on Amazon. And if you'd like an autographed copy, you can purchase it at moxiemindsetbook.com. My websites, I have two. One for all of my activities is Dr Dina MD. That's DRDINAMD.com. And if you want to learn about my practice, it's aglowdermatology.com, and that's AGLOW dermatology.com. And you can follow me on social media at Dr Dina MD on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And you can also, Aglow Dermatology has a separate Facebook page.
Well, all right. Thank you so much, Dr. Dina, for chatting with me today on the Doctor's Life podcast. You're really an inspiration for other doctors. I'm so glad that you could share with us today. And thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode of the podcast, the Doctor's Life podcast. Until next time, hope everybody stays happy and healthy. Take care.
You've been listening to the Doctor's Life podcast with Diane Ansari Win, MD. Go to www.dianeansari-win.com to read show notes, listen to past episodes, share your comments and show ideas, and pick up your free PDF and video of easy and proven strategies that will melt your daily stress away. That's www.dianeansari-winn.com.